This is a Brawl Network production.
Tigers with the ball, less than 13 to play. Harris on the baseline, Porter to the block, puts it up, Hierarchy shot, jammed down by Jeremiah. Mr. Tillman is on the scene, and the Tigers back within a point.
Here's Josie, got the first down, breaks free, midfield, foot race for the end zone, 20, 10, hello, touchdown.
You're listening to the Mizzou Brawl Podcast.
Brennan out of the shotgun, 20 seconds to play. Takes the snap, move in the pocket, right being chased, throws it underneath, incomplete! Start drinking it, folks! Start drinking!
Here are your hosts, Nate Sanchez and Chris George.
Welcome back for another episode of Mizzou Brawl. With me, as always, is my co-host, Chris George, as we get ready to break down what was March Madness is now March Sadness, as the Missouri Tigers basketball season has now come to a close. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm good, but excuse my constant sniffling because it is allergy season.
Man, I feel that as well. I have always had awful allergies. It's not fun at all. Believe me, I just clocked out of work and had to blow my nose way too many times. And it's another interesting time in Mizzou sports. We were geared up for a tournament run that probably was going to go no further than the round of 32 because Gonzaga is a complete and utter wagon. Oklahoma gave Gonzaga pretty close to what felt like their A game, and Gonzaga still ended up winning rather easily. But yeah, we had a Missouri-Oklahoma game on Saturday night on primetime at Lucas Oil Stadium on TNT, and Mizzou came up short, falling by 2 to OU. Chris, before we dive into the game, general thoughts on the Oklahoma game?
I mean, it went expected how I was expecting it to go. I was watching with like a ton of my friends, and yeah, they're Mizzou fans, but they're not diehards like me. And I think it was like mid-second half when they were like down 8 with like 9 minutes left. I was just sitting there with a straight face, I didn't say a word the whole game because I hate talking to people during Mizzou games. Like that's all my focus. And they kept like nudging me, like, dude, we can win this game. And I finally broke. I was like, dude, it's Mizzou. We can't finish games. Like, yeah, obviously I'm hoping we're going to win, but like it's Mizzou. It's probably not going to happen. And then we all know what happens from there.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. I'm relatively new to Mizzou. I am from Dallas, grew up in Dallas, so never really had any affiliation with Mizzou before I came here, and am now a student here. And I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. It was my first pretty big game with Mizzou, and I went to the game with a couple of my friends and my dad. Drove out to Indy for the game, had a great day leading up to the game. Downtown Indianapolis, by the way, is a fantastic place to hang out. Their downtown,
my brother was
really, really cool.
Yeah, he was saying, like, my brother went, he called me probably like 6 times. He was hammered. He called me like 6 times, and he was just like, dude, you should have came. And I was like, no, I'm happy I didn't. Mizzou lost. He was like, I don't care about Mizzou losing. Like, it's so fun. It's packed. Like, you got to come next year.
Yeah, so Indianapolis was a very, very cool downtown. But upon leaving the arena in the immediate aftermath of the loss, I was letting out some choice words. I was very upset. And my 2 friends that I was with, and my dad was upset for me. He was rooting for my school. And my 2 friends that I was with had been Mizzou fans since they can remember, since they're from St. Louis. And they were just numb to it. They were over it quickly because they're used to this type of stuff. And since I was new to it, I just couldn't believe it. And it was a really disappointing loss on a lot of fronts. We can get into Xavier Pinson later, but before we dive into all the bad stuff about how this game went, can we talk for a moment about Drew Smith and what a fantastic Missouri Tiger he is? Because he's just, I've said for a while, he is the perfect college point guard. He's just smart, great for the locker room, hustles. He's good at just about everything you would want on the floor. 3-point shooting, finishing at the rim, passing, phenomenal defender. He left it all on the court, man. Drew Smith, he finished with, I believe, 20 points. He had a career-high 6 threes, including that late flurry at the end that made a game that shouldn't have been a game at the end a game. He gave Missouri a chance at the end. And, he didn't end up getting an opportunity to try and win or tie the game. Or to tie the game, sorry. They were down 3 on that last possession. But before we get into all the negative stuff, shout out to Drew Smith. Just a phenomenal college player. Hats off to him for a great college career. He's going to do great things in whatever he does, be it, if he wants to go play overseas, he absolutely can go do that. And he'll make a career playing basketball if he wants to.
Yes.
And shout out to him for just a phenomenal season. And I've joked with some of my friends before when watching the games. You've had moments throughout the year where you've kind of gotten annoyed at players that have no-showed or made mistakes. And I was like, I don't think there's been a single point this year when I've been like, damn, Drew Smith. Like, every single player, you look up and down the roster, you've gotten frustrated with at some point. I can't recall a point I've gotten frustrated with Drew Smith.
I mean, yeah, it's safe to say, he put the team on his back all year. You had players like Pinson who had spurts of good games. You had players like Tillman who had spurts of good games. But Drew Smith is a guy who literally put the team on his back the whole year. Excuse that background noise. My dad just came down. But no. So, this season, what he averaged, 35 minutes a game, something like that. He played out of his mind. He was the leader on and off the court. He was able to set the tempo of the game. He was able to do so many things. And losing him next year, I think it's going to hurt a lot more than we think.
Yeah. He was just so consistent. I mean, every night you knew what you were going to get from him. You knew you were going to get phenomenal defense, 15, 16 points, 5 or 6 assists, 5 or 6 rebounds. It was just consistent. And he was everything you would want in a college point guard. So, now we're going to get into the dicey stuff. But, yeah, shout out to Drew Smith. Just one of the, I'm pretty new to this program, but he's got to be up there in terms of one of the better Mizzou basketball players.
Yes.
Maybe not ever, because there's been some really great ones, but he's up there for sure in terms
in the last 5 years, no doubt.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, man. And but yeah, he did all he could. Jeremiah Tillman did all he could. Tillman played very well. I believe he had 16 points, 12 rebounds, I believe was his final stat line. Jeremiah Tillman played very well. They just didn't get enough from anyone else, really. I mean, Kobe Brown had a good game. They just kind of struggled to get a rhythm. They looked decent in the first half. They took a 1-point lead into half, and then OU got hot shooting. They got into some foul trouble. The refs are not why Mizzou lost the game, but Jeremiah Tillman's 4th foul that knocked him out of the game for a really, really crucial stretch was massive and was a terrible call. But yeah, just a lot of unfortunate bounces for Mizzou, especially in the second half. And you know what? It was kind of a microcosm of their season, the second half was. Or that game. They would start strong and would fade in the second half. And that was kind of the story all year. And when you look at it from a broad sense, that's kind of what happened in Mizzou's season. They started out phenomenal in the first half of the season and faded down the stretch. And that's just the unfortunate reality of it, as they ended up falling to OU by 2 in the biggest game of the year. They just didn't get enough from other people. I mean, they got over half of their points from 2 people in Drew Smith and Tillman.
I hate saying this, but Mizzou lost this game for one reason, and it's 2 words: Konzo Martin.
Yeah.
Every single game, it's every time. You play great in the first half. They got, I think, an 8-9 point lead. They do great. And they go into halftime up 1, which is fine. You take going up 1 into halftime every time. But what separates other coaches in the country compared to Konzo is they make adjustments. So, I don't know what goes on in that locker room, and I hate to, rip on my favorite team probably ever to watch, but you go out into the second half and you run the same man offense. They find an answer. You don't switch. Come late in the game, you want your scores in. You play Bugs over Pinson. That didn't make sense to me. And when it's crunch time and the NCAA tournament with 3 minutes left and you're down 4, whatever it is, and you only have 2 of your starters out there, I get due to foul trouble, but at that point, it's all on the line.
At that point, I agreed. When Tillman got his 4th, I think he had to take him out, but he left him out too long.
Yeah.
When it got to 3 minutes, I was like, get Tillman in the damn game. What are we doing?
Exactly. And I know deep down that pisses the players off. I mean, Pinson's leaving because probably the coaching staff, they don't have an answer. And it was so frustrating all year. And it's been frustrating for the last 20 years. I've been a Mizzou fan. And I don't see it much, but
it was early in the half they got a great start. They got a great spark from Mark Smith. Mark Smith had 11 points. He hit 3 first half 3-pointers and then kind of went quiet. And they got a little bit from Mark Smith, but they just didn't get enough from their bench. Mitchell Smith didn't add enough. Drew Buggs did what he could. He played 22 minutes to Pinson's 18. And Javon Pickett played decent minutes off the bench. Kobe Brown played pretty well. But what it just came down to was all year, and I said it on the podcast last week leading up to the Oklahoma game, this team doesn't have enough punch without a good Xavier Pinson. Drew Smith is a great player. Jeremiah Tillman is a great player. They will get theirs. You need more punch, and outside of Xavier Pinson, there's not a lot of scoring punch that Mizzou has. Besides Drew Smith, they don't have a lot of guys that can break down a defense and attack the rim. And Xavier Pinson's last game, he had 2 points, 18 minutes, 1 for 7 from the floor, 0 for 3 from 3. And people are complaining. Here's my take on the Xavier Pinson situation, which we can now get into Pinson. It was announced yesterday that he's entered the transfer portal. After the way that game on Saturday played out, it was still kind of shocking to see, but I'm still like everyone kind of knew it was coming. It was still just kind of shocking to see it actually happen. And Pinson goes out with a stinker of a game. Kwanzaa played him 18 minutes. He barely played. He posted something after the game on his Instagram story, something about, because I'm assuming people were like, wait, was Pinson hurt? And he said 100% healthy, 100% heartbroken. So, and it kind of started at the Ole Miss game when Kwanzaa said something after the game about Pinson. He didn't seem right. He wasn't attacking like he normally does. And starting at that first Ole Miss game, a rift between Kwanzaa and Pinson began, and we kind of saw it more and more. We saw a lot more Drew Buggs down the stretch of the season, and it finally culminated into the biggest game of the season. Xavier Pinson is glued to the bench while Drew Buggs is out there in crunch time. And don't know where the disconnect was, but something was wildly wrong behind the scenes with Xavier Pinson.
Yeah, and people were saying, oh, look at Pinson. He was shooting 1 of 7. He was 0 of 3, from 3, whatever. When it's crunch time, you play your best players. I don't care if he's 0 of 12 in that game. You play your best players because you know what they can do. And no hate on Drew Buggs. He's a great basketball player. But Drew Buggs doesn't have the offensive spark that we needed that was sitting 3 chairs down on the bench. That's what we needed. We needed Pinson, who's quick, who's got insane ball handling, and is a good team player. But supposedly that the beef between Konzo and Pinson he wasn't able to get into the game. And I knew right when that game, I didn't even finish the end of the game. I turned it off with 2 minutes left when they went down 8. I turned it off. And I knew I literally packed up my things and went back to St. Louis that night. And I was packing and I was like, he's gone. There's no shot.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't a shocker at all.
No, not at all. And then today, he already has 3 offers, 2 of them coming from SEC teams. So you have Auburn and Georgia going after him. And the third was Nebraska. Pinson's going to go to Auburn and then play us and drop 40. And he's going to look at Konzo and say, look what you missed out on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we can get into that in a little bit, but just a few more thoughts on just generally how that game played out. It's hard to put a finger on exactly what went into this team and why they faded in the second half of games so consistently. It kind of culminated. Things things kind of started with that Alabama game when things went sideways in the second half of the Alabama game. And you look up and you look at the schedule starting with the Alabama game in terms of second half collapses. This might take a little bit to get through it all, but I'm going to go game by game. The Alabama game, second half collapse. They almost blew that game. They got outscored by 13 in the second half. You go next. The first Ole Miss game, they were down 5 at halftime of that Ole Miss game. They got outscored by 16 in the second half of that game. Arkansas, they were up 4 at half. They ended up losing by 5 in overtime. The Georgia game that they lost by 10 without Tillman, up 4 at half, they lose by 10. South Carolina game, that was the only game where they just wire to wire played great. And honestly, even in that game, they were up 16 at half, and South Carolina won the second half of that game. The second Ole Miss game, they were down 9 at half. It made a push. So, that game, they were just playing from behind the whole time. Florida game, they came back and played well. LSU game, that's another instance. Tied at half, lose the game by 6. The Georgia game in the SEC tournament, down. They ended up winning, and they pulled away. But you recall Mizzou had like a 10-point lead with a couple minutes left, and that game ended up being unbelievably sweaty. Arkansas game in the SEC tournament, up 1 at half, lose by 6. Oklahoma game, up 1 at half, they lose by 4, or lose by 2. So it was just a common theme, and it's definitely something Kwanzaa needs to evaluate because, I just listed off quite literally their last 10 or so games and 10, 11, 12 games, and the same theme popped up in 10 of the 12 or however many games I just rattled off.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like, does Konzo not sit down and look at all of his stat sheet and say, wow, we suck in the second half. Let's change something. Or no, let's just keep playing the same way we do in the first half, change nothing, let them make the adjustments and let them get one step ahead of us. And just like you said, 10 out of the last 12 games came from behind and we lose. With this coaching, I hate saying this. I have no hope for this team while this, I don't know about the whole coaching staff, mainly Konzo, is running this team. And from day one, I was saying, let's get Kim English. Nope, he already got a job at George Mason. So we're kind of stuck with him. I think it's till May of 2023 as we cannot fire him without cause.
Let me play devil's advocate here. Everyone's upset at Kwanzaa. Everyone wants him gone. This was the statement year for the team, and it came up a little bit short, especially at the end. And, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I'm not as big of an anti-Kwanzaa guy as everyone seems to be. Everyone at Mizzou is up in arms about Kwanzaa, but let's be real here. Missouri was a laughingstock program when he came here. He's taken Mizzou to 2 tournaments in 4 years. I've said that, this was a little bit disappointing, but he gets these next 2 years to kind of figure it out. He'll get this new crop of guys in with 5 freshmen. And now with Pinson gone, he has 2 scholarship slots, I believe, to fill. And, we'll get into this in a little bit, but the transfer portal is loaded with talent this year. So, he has these next 2 years to try and figure out. But as much of a bummer as Saturday night was, overall, this has been he's making progress at Mizzou. I think Mizzou fans, and again, I'm new to this, so, I might be a little bit more rational than Mizzou fans that are sick of it. But I think that Mizzou fans are quick to forget how brutal things were before Kwanzaa got here, and they've made progress. They've made marked progress. They made 2 tournaments in 4 years. And now it's time to build on it. I agree. Now let's go. But I do think Kwanzaa, and they can't fire him without cause anyways, but even without that firing without cause issue, I think Kwanzaa has done enough to deserve these next couple years. And you know what? If those 2 years go sideways, then get Kim English from George Mason. Kim English will not turn down Mizzou to leave George Mason. And if they go great, then you have your great coach with Kwanzaa Martin. But I do think that, this is pretty disappointing. I'm also mindful of rushing to get Kwanzaa out of here because I do think he's a good coach. And I think that his recruiting needs to pick up, and I think that he has an opportunity in the transfer portal to sort of make good on some of his recruiting losses, like Caleb Love or Cameron Fletcher, just different guys. So I know you're out on him, but I think that Kwanzaa has done enough to warrant an opportunity to keep building this program because, like it or not, he's made progress.
Completely agree. I mean, yeah, I was just ripping on him, but yeah, you do have to look at the upside he's done. Before he was coach, we had Kim Anderson, and I think those 2 years we had a combined, I want to say like 16 wins or 17 wins in 2 years, something like that.
It was a laughingstock.
Yeah, absolute laughingstock. We were like the Vanderbilt this year. Like, oh, you see Vanderbilt on the schedule? That's a win. That was us. So you have to give Konzo credit on. I mean, he got the Porters, he got Cassius, he got Drew Smith, he got all these guys. You have to give him credit there, and you have to give him credit on getting us number 10 in the country this year. When's the last time Mizzou's been top 10? 2012. So you got to give him credit there. He's a good coach. I really do think that. I really think he is a good coach.
He's a good coach, not a great coach.
Yes, yeah. And he struggles in two things, and that's recruiting, and that is in-game adjustments. I've already rambled on about that, so I'm not going to go on about it again. But if he improves on those two things, then you have a completely different program with all this talent coming out of St. Louis that's going to want to come to Mizzou and not North Carolina or Kentucky, something like that.
Yeah, and overall, this team has enough talent. This team has had enough talent to go make a little bit of a run. They demonstrated that throughout the year when they got up to number 10 in the country, and they beat some great teams. But what Mizzou needs to do is focus on recruiting in state. There is so much talent that comes out of St. Louis and Kansas City and all over Missouri. And I saw a tweet today. It was and it might be misleading. I don't know who the 12 players are, but I saw a tweet today that there are currently 12 players who went to high school in the state of Missouri that are in the NBA, and only 2 of them went to Mizzou, and that is the 2 Porters. So, that's a bit of a bummer of a stat, but I think it starts with Kwanzaa needs to be able to lock down Kansas City, lock down St. Louis, which, it's a competitive market. I mean, let's be real. You can bitch and moan about Kwanzaa not getting these 5 stars out of St. Louis all you want. Bottom line is he's competing with Duke. He's competing with North Carolina. It's a tough sell compared to those guys. If I'm a 5-star recruit, I'm probably picking Duke over Mizzou. It's a tough sell. And so people are acting like his job is easy of getting these guys. Guess what? He's competing with Coach K. He's competing with Roy Williams. He's competing with all of these blue bloods that just eat 5 stars for breakfast. So, overall, I think that Saturday night was disappointing, but it was a sign of progress for the program, and that overall, the ramifications for the program in general, this season was a step in the right direction. And now they have to hit a bit of a reset button. They lose a ton of their production, and it's going to be on some of these guys that are bringing in, be it Yaya Kira, be it Brazil. I'm not sure how you say his last name. The freshman guard, Brazil. I'm sure we'll learn soon enough. And another one I'm forgetting. Brookshire, Kobe Brown's little brother, Caleb Brown, is coming in. I know I'm forgetting. Sean Dura-Gordon.
Yeah.
I mean, they have some talented guys coming in, and now he kind of gets to hit the reset button, cultivate his own guys. And as much of a bummer as because it would have been nice to have a senior Xavier Pinson as a leader on this team, but guess what? He's gone. It's over. You can't fix that. He's gone. And they have 2 open slots on their team. And, Xavier Pinson didn't work out at Mizzou for whatever reason. We'll never know behind the scenes what went on with him and Kwanzaa, where the rift started, how it started, but it happened. It's over. And they have 2 open slots, and there's already names being floated around. There's rumors today that Caleb Love is his dad was tweeting out stuff about him potentially leaving. Mm-hmm. I don't have tweets in front of me, but it would indicate that Caleb Love, something's going wrong at North Carolina. And Also, I do want to tamper expectations with Caleb Love. Even if he transfers to North Carolina, I would imagine he comes to Mizzou just because it came down to North Carolina and Mizzou, and I would imagine Mizzou would have interest. But it does also need to be noted that I saw a tweet today that in the 18 years of 24/7 sports, like recruiting and tracking these guys, Caleb Love had the worst shooting percentage of any 5-star recruit in the 18-year history.
I saw that.
31% from the floor. He had a brutal year. He had a 1-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. He just had a brutal year at North Carolina, and it sounds like things went sideways and he wants out. And, that's an opportunity for Mizzou. We'll remain to see if he wants out. I already put out a tweet when he visited Mizzou a year ago, or a year and a half ago. Me and a couple of other guys put together a banner to hang up outside of our fraternity house to get him to come to Mizzou. So you know what? It's round 2. We're going to try and get Caleb Love to Mizzou. But yeah, when you look at the transfer portal, Caleb Love is a potential opportunity. Mizzou's already reached out to Cameron Fletcher. Brandon McKissick, the UMKC grad transfer point guard, is a fantastic player. He's a great defensive player. He can score. He can do just about everything. And, he would be a fantastic ad. And he posted a graphic today on his Twitter of him. It was like an edit of him with a bunch of college logos around him. And what I'm assuming are the teams that have reached out to him. He said he quoted under, he said, this is not a finalist list. I'm just assuming this is who all reached out or offered. But I know Mizzou is on the list. KU is on the list. Kansas State was on the list. A lot of Power 5 schools were in the conversation for McKissick, who will absolutely be one of the most coveted grad transfers in the country.
Yeah, you look at Mizzou's last 2 grad transfers that were guards. You have Cassius Robertson, who went to Canisius. And, when you see that, you're like, oh, we got a grad transfer from Canisius. He's not going to be doing anything too special. No, he was a baller. You get Drew Smith from Evansville. Once again, low expectations, baller. But Brandon McKissick is good. He went to SLU, which is 20 minutes from my house. And I know SLU's really pecking at him too, but I was looking at some of his stats. I think he's 43% from 3. I want to say he averaged 18 or something at UMKC. But he's just one of those guys. Look what Drinkwitz is doing with football and all these St. Louis guys committing.
Yep.
Imagine if we got Caleb Love, Cameron Fletcher, and Brandon McKissick. Then I would have so much hope for another tournament bid next year. But yeah, it all comes back to the coaching and whether or not they can build that relationship, which I think they can. I really do think they can. Almost got Caleb Love originally. If he does transfer, I'm hoping to be his number 1 target. And maybe Cameron's waiting for Caleb Love to do something. If Caleb Love says, yeah, I'm leaving, and they're talking, we go to Mizzou, yeah, let's do it. Then our program's changed.
Yeah, and I said on Twitter today that, Kwanzaa has no excuse to not get great talents in with these 2 slots that he has on the roster. There's an egregious amount of talent in the transfer portal this year. And you look at, they have these 2 slots, and you look at who's coming back next year. And you have Torrance Watson coming back. You have Parker Brown coming back, Kobe Brown, Dewar Gordon, Javon Pickett, Torrance Watson, I already said, and Jordan Wilmore. And then you're adding in these 5 freshmen, Antoine Brookshire, Yaya Kita, Trevin Brazil, Sean Dewar Gordon, and Caleb Brown. And then you have these 2 slots. Kwanzaa has to make good on these 2 slots. He has a pretty good opportunity here. Trevon Brazil is a 6'7", kind of combo guard, small forward type guy. He was a late bloomer, wasn't really ranked anywhere up until Kwanzaa was one of the first coaches to contact him and kind of start courting him. And then that was when other schools started courting him, and then he chose Mizzou because they were Kwanzaa sniffed him out early before a lot of the hype came in on him. Antoine Brookshire is his college teammate. They're both from Springfield. They played in high school together. So this recruiting class, it's 9th in the SEC. 40th in the country. It's not a fantastic recruiting class, but it has a decently high ceiling, and they have some guys that they can bring in and develop. And I trust Kwanzaa to be able to get these guys going. And, you know, he needs to add some veteran presence on this team too. It's going to be a very young team next year. Kobe Brown is probably the best returning player, and they're going to need some more scoring punch to put around these guys because it's going to be a young team, and it's going to be, hopefully it's more of a reload year than it is a rebuilding year, but you know, that remains to be seen, and we'll know a little bit more about this team once the transfer portal goes through.
Yeah, I mean, you look at like when we recruited Pinson, you like looked at him, you're like, yeah, he's a 3-star, he's got potential, but I'm not expecting anything much now. And then look what he just did this year and the end of last year. I'm just hoping one of these 3-4 guards we got can be like that. And and if you throw in that senior grad transfer like a Cassius Robertson or a Drew Smith, that just helps him out even more. So I mean, yeah, like you said, I hope it's not a rebuilding year. A lot of people, all my friends are like, over under Mizzou wins on 8.5 next year. I'm like, okay, don't give up on them yet. They're not going to be the laughing stock of the SEC, but we're certainly not going to be in the top 4.
It's absolutely pertaining on how good are these freshmen and how good are they right away, and what does he do with these last 2 transfer slots? Because, you know, you start looking at this roster, you get McKissick and let's say Caleb Love, or McKissick and Cameron Fletcher for these last 2 scholarships. You know, you're looking a little bit differently at this roster. So, you know, this is kind of a wait and see. Let's see how they do in the transfer portal. There's a ton of talent. A Duke 5-star top 50 forward. His name's slipping my mind. Entered the transfer portal today. You know, let's see. Let's see what Kwanzaa has in mind for these last 2 spots. And, you know, with that, we can jump into some questions. We're going to start doing for our podcast. We're doing our weekly episodes. We record Wednesday, post Thursday. We're going to put out a tweet. We asked for anyone to submit questions about anything relating to Mizzou. Do you have a question on Mizzou football, Mizzou basketball, Kwanzaa Martin, Coach Drinkwitz, anything? Fire away in the comments on the tweet, and we'll get to you. So yeah, we'll start with this first question from Jack Williams. Was this Mizzou's make or break year? In other words, are we going to go down a very bad stretch of Mizzou basketball for the next 4 years or so? So I'll go first, Chris. I'm going to say no. This was not a make or break year. It was a make or break year in terms of that class, but I like this recruiting class, and you know, it's not bad. I mean, they're going to be young next year. Next year might be a little bit more rough, but by, let's say, the 2022-23 season, you know, these guys are going to have a lot of experience, and hopefully these 5 recruits that he brought in can grow together and turn into something special. They have guys, and they have these transfer slots to be able to build around. So no, I don't think this was Mizzou's make or break year.
I'll say this. I think it was their make year, but not their break year.
Yes, that's what
this was the year. This was the year to do something. It didn't get done, but this wasn't the year that we break, and for the next 3 years we finished 13th in the SEC. This team had the talent to do it. They didn't get it done, but no, it was not their break year.
Okay, yeah, no, I 100% agree. Zach Devine has 2 questions. First one is it worth firing Kwanzaa since the payout for firing him is the most for any period in his contract following the season, $6 million, or waiting a year to see if he can land guys and continue the culture? And then the second one is, can Kwanzaa work some magic and land some transfers like he's done in the past, like Buggs, Robertson, both Smiths? I'll answer the first one. No, well, first of all, they can't fire him without cause until 2022 or 2023. I don't remember. But Kwanzaa isn't going anywhere. So Mizzou fans everywhere right now are bitching, moaning, kicking, and screaming about Kwanzaa wanting him gone. Guess what? He's not going anywhere. Whether you like him or not, Kwanzaa Martin is Mizzou's coach for at least another year or 2. And it's not worth firing him. I still think he's a good coach. And I'm going to give him a chance these next 2 years to build. And yes, I do think he has proven that he can land impact players in the transfer market. Cassius Robertson was a fantastic player. Drew Smith, we sung his praises to start off this episode. Drew Buggs was a good backup point guard. Mark Smith was a solid starter. As much as people might complain about him, Mark Smith was a solid starter. So, I do trust Kwanzaa in the transfer market, and I've said it probably 50 times on this episode alone. This year's transfer portal is oozing with talent.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what he said in the first question, no, you can't fire him. Yes, we all hate him right now, and we're all going to hate him probably for the next couple weeks. But at the same time, you don't see Kentucky fans saying, let's fire Coach Cal. They had like 9 wins this year. So you gotta trust the process and see what he's got to do with that. And yes, I do think Kwanzaa can work that magic to get some big time transfers. He already did that twice. I don't know. I don't understand why he can't do it a third time and bring in a good guy to get us some more wins.
Yeah, and a lot of these transfers that are coming onto the market have, past connections, pretty strong connections in Mizzou. Look no further than Caleb Love, Brandon McKissick. There's guys out there. Next question. What's the future for Mizzou basketball after losing the core of our team? It's an interesting question, and, the core of the team is gone, Pinson. I mean, the entire starting 5 except for Kobe Brown's gone, plus Mitchell Smith. It certainly doesn't look – it's not clear yet. I think it resides a lot in these this 5-man recruiting class that's coming in. With Brazil, Dura Gordon, Yaya Kita, Brookshire, and Caleb Brown. It relies on them, and it relies on the transfer portal. And that's going to be on Kwanzaa to develop them, and we're going to have to wait and see how these guys work out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the future is not bright right now, especially it being off season in both football and basketball. So we really have nothing to look forward to. So I think we're all trying to find like the negative things to point out about this team. But like, can't forget like what we did this season. We got to number 10 in the country. So like, yeah, you lose a big bulk of your team, your core, pretty much all of your scoring. But I mean, we've seen this before. We look at Kondo's first year. The year before, we had nothing, and we went to something in 1 year. So I'm still hoping that this year we can still have something. And I think the future is bright. These freshmen are good, and if we can develop them, it might not be next year where we go 22 or 20-10 or whatever. But like, I think in the next 3-4 years, you'll see us in the tournament multiple times.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is interesting. That just came across timeline about an hour ago. Amari Davis, sophomore from Wisconsin, Green Bay, entered the transfer portal. ESPN's Jeff Borzello ranks him as the 22nd best player in the transfer portal and 17th currently uncommitted transfer. He just tweeted an hour ago that he received an offer from Mizzou. He averaged 17 points a game and was second team all conference in his league. And he was a great player in his conference. And I don't know enough about him yet, but this is just another example of a great mid-major player that Mizzou has interest in and that is going to offer him. So that could be another pickup. And that kind of fits right into the narrative that we've been talking about all day. We can dive into the next question here. When did the downfall of the season start? People will point to the Ole Miss game, the first Ole Miss game. That was their first loss. They lost their first game right after beating Alabama. I think the downfall of the season began in the second half of the Alabama game. That was Mizzou kind of peaked. I feel like the season peaked at halftime of the Alabama game when they dominated Alabama for the first 20 minutes of that game. And towards the end, they just kind of fell apart, and Alabama made an unbelievable run and damn near won the game. Mitchell Smith made a fantastic block to save that game. I think that it started in the second half of that Alabama game when some of it was Alabama caught fire, and yeah, only so much you knew about that, but also, the team just completely collapsed.
Yeah.
The second half of that game and should have lost that game. And I think it kind of started there and it carried over into the Ole Miss game, and then it snowballed from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think downfall is a hard word to use. I mean, they late in the season, they still got wins at Florida. They played LSU close. I would say it was more of a steady decline rather than just a straight downfall drop-off. But being number 10 in the country and going to unranked in the matter of like 2 weeks, that's a downfall, but they did bounce back a little bit, got one postseason win. But yeah, I mean, I think downfall is a hard word to use. I think overall they played great all year. You got to give them credit for what they've done. They just had a few hiccups here and there. And it was a season to remember.
Yeah, I agree. One more thing on Amari Davis, the Green Bay transfer. He is young too. That might be another thing that Kwanzaa looks in. McKissick is a grad transfer. What's up?
Not a grad transfer?
No, Amari Davis is a sophomore. Well, he was a sophomore this past year. According to Dave Matter, 6'3" guard, averaged over 17 points a game for Green Bay as a sophomore. And it looks like there is a Kwanzaa Martin connection. The Green Bay head coach is Link Darner. He was a teammate of Kwanzaa at Purdue. So it's pretty clear there is a connection there. Next question. Interesting one. This is probably the most interesting one I saw on the list. We got about 8 or 9 submissions, and we love these submissions. Submit questions every week. If you, yeah, keep firing them away. We'll love to answer these questions, and I love doing this. Next question would be, how different? And ironically enough, it was the question that got the most likes that people liked. How different would the season have been if Tillman's grandmother hadn't passed away? And obviously, horrible loss for Jeremiah. Family is family, and I can't imagine what he went through. That was clearly hard for him. He needed time to step away. And that was a very, very difficult time for them. And I don't know how much different it would have been. Here's why. Like I just said, the downfall started with the Alabama game, in my opinion. Things started to go sideways after that game. And I don't know that they would have beaten, and the Ole Miss game really started to make things snowball. I don't know that they would have beaten Ole Miss that night with Tillman. Tillman is hugely important for what they did, both defensively and on the pick and roll on offense. I think it would have been different, and maybe they would have come out of the slump a little bit earlier. But as far as overall, how they did in the tournament, would they gone farther than the SEC? No. I think maybe that rough stretch would have ended a little bit sooner. Maybe they win the second Arkansas game, but I don't know how much different it would have been if Tillman didn't have to step away from the team.
Yeah, before I answer this, I'm not blaming these losses on Tillman for leaving. Like, that's not all.
He has to do what he has to do.
Yeah, and that's respect to him for doing that. I will say the absence of Tillman probably affected the outcomes of those games, but there's nothing you can do about that. You saw, even when we had him late in the season, we still weren't winning games. So I agree with you. I don't think it played that big of a difference, except maybe you get one more win and you get a 7 seed and 7-9 seed. But other than that, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree. It was a tough situation all around, but I don't think that was I don't think Tillman having to step away from the team was what, broke the season's back.
No, it was only a week. It wasn't like he's gone for a month or 2 weeks. It was just a week. Yeah,
of course. Next question. This one comes from none other than Hype Ches, better known as my father. Thank you, Dad, for submitting a question. He says, boys, need to get your thoughts on what the heck happened since we were ranked number 10. I watched every game. It was frustrating to watch us implode in the second half. Clearly, Tilly missing time hurt, but Pinson's implosion was also hard to watch. Is some of that not on Kwanzaa? Wasted year. ... My dad, he like me, he's new to Mizzou, and he kind of got sucked into Mizzou early on in the year when they beat Wichita State and then Oregon. I was like, Dad, our team's pretty good. You should start watching. My dad loves college basketball, so he watched some of these Mizzou games and really latched on. And, he really latched on it to the point where he flew out to Indianapolis to meet me and a couple of my friends and go to the OU game with us. I agree with a lot of what he said. It was very frustrating to watch Mizzou implode in the second half of games and in the second half of the season. He points to Tilly missing time. That hurt. But he points to Pinson's implosion was hard to watch, and is that on Kwanzaa? Well, I do think that, Tilly's absence, like we said, it was hard, but it wasn't a backbreaker for the season. The season turned when Xavier Pinson was no longer a viable scoring option and a viable, consistent player. The peak of the team was when Xavier Pinson was having 27-point games against Tennessee, 36 against TCU. That was a brutal loss for Mizzou because Xavier Pinson was not the same the last half of the season. And, some of that is on Kwanzaa, but we also don't know what went on behind the scenes with him and Kwanzaa. Something clearly went wrong. And I do think part of that is on Kwanzaa that Pinson faded, and it's on the coach to, get the best out of his players. So, yeah, I agree that some of that is on Kwanzaa, but we also don't know what went on behind the scenes. So I guess my uneducated answer, not knowing what happened behind the scenes, is that, yeah, that's on Kwanzaa because a coach's job is to get the best out of his players. And he didn't get the best out of Xavier Pinson at the end of the season. And he didn't get anything out of him at the end of the season because he was on the bench for the last 8 minutes of the biggest game of the season.
Yeah, I mean, from what we could see, it's on Konzo, but we don't know if Pinson had a terrible attitude off the court, and Konzo was like, well, unless you shape up, you're going to play. It's just hard to tell. That's a great question, but it's hard for me to answer that. I mean, you could say we kind of let the fame get to our head, and maybe they're like, oh, damn, we're a number 10 team in the country. And that's all they could think about instead of focusing on the games. But yeah, since you and your dad are new Mizzou fans, you guys will shortly, you will finally realize it's typical Mizzou. It happens every year. I'm just waiting for that one time in my whole lifetime that doesn't happen. And they break through and win either a national championship or a conference tournament, whatever it may be. But yeah, it's hard to determine that when you don't have all the inside information, when you can only see what beat writers are tweeting. But
we'll never know. That's the other thing. We'll never know. Kwanzaa will never say anything about it. And assuming Pinson doesn't go scorched earth, I don't think he will. Because Pinson wants offers from big schools, and that will scare schools away if he goes scorched earth on Kwanzaa. So that's a long way of saying we'll never know what happened.
Yeah. Unless Xavier Pinson somehow hears this and wants to come on the show, then maybe we can get a little.
Yeah, Xavier Pinson, if you're out there, we would love to have you on and discuss. If you're out there, Xavier, we would love to have an exclusive with you. But yeah, last question here coming from Andrew O'Brien. Watching every other team style of play is very much more entertaining. How big of a turnoff do you think this is for recruits? And how big of a factor do you think the defensive-minded but not good at defense type team that has played in the disastrous recruiting recently? Well, first I want to say the recruiting has not been disastrous. They just made the tournament. And last year's team just got derailed by injuries. We see how important Tillman is to this team now. And last year he was hurt. Reed Nico had to play a lot. This team last year was pretty derailed by injuries. And also I disagree with do you think the defensive minded, but not good at defense type team? I mean, Mizzou is a more defensive minded team, but they were a good defensive team. They could play defense. And I guess what he's trying to get at is Mizzou's style of play is not a sexy style of play that, that lights up the scoreboards and gets recruits in. And, there's great programs around the country that aren't track meets that run up and down the floor. It's all about building your program around your coaching style and what you envision. And I trust Kwanzaa to do that. I don't think it's a turnoff for recruits because they've gotten good players. People act like Mizzou hasn't gotten good players to come to Missouri before. we've rattled off several names, Jeremiah Tillman, Cassius Robertson, the Porters, Mark Smith, Pinson. I mean, there's a laundry list of good players that have come through in these last 4 years. And, I think that Cuonzo doesn't need to change his style of coaching to adapt to recruits. Great coaches have their system. They do what they have their system in place. And, you bring in guys that fit that system and have potential and build around that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's not like football. There's only so many players. You got 5 players on the court compared to 22 guys that play on the field. There's only a very limited number of guys that you can pick from. And yeah, we're not going to be doing the flashy dunks that you see on Top 10 from Duke and North Carolina. But I mean, look at Oral Roberts. They're in the Sweet 16 right now, and they are a mid-level program. Not a lot of flash and style to them, but they're winning. They got a good coaching staff, and they got players that believe in their coaching staff, and that's way more important than being able to put on a show and get on SportsCenter.
Yeah, and if you don't like the slow style, you can go ahead and be Georgia and run track meets every night and give up 80, 90 points every night and lose a lot of games when you get great recruits like Anthony Edwards. So, I disagree. It's a good question for sure, but I think you need to get cater your style to the recruits that fit what you want. You can't force and just say, all right, we're going to turn us into a track meet and not play defense and just run up and down. No, you need to get your system and build it. And I trust Cuonzo to do that. And it sounds like these are kind of his guys that he's bringing in, and he's going to get in a couple transfers here to help solidify next year's roster. So, do you have any other thoughts, Chris?
Not really. I'm looking forward to see what Cuonzo does. We got a long time till Mizzou sports are back. We got up until, excuse me, these allergies, next September. In the meantime, I'll have my eyes peeled on the transfer portal, just waiting for someone to commit and then become his biggest fan. An exciting football season coming up, and it'll be good. It'll be good. Sports at Mizzou will be back. Yeah,
absolutely. And so, you kind of touched on it. Both main sports are in the off season. It's going to be a little tougher to fill out content, but we'll be bringing you guys content. We'll be trying to bring on guests. We'll be doing off-season previews of positional previews for football, and talking transfer portal. There will be off-season news, and we'll still bring you content regardless. Episodes might be a little bit shorter. This was a little bit a longer one, considering we had a tournament game, a star player transfer, and just great questions from listeners. So overall, it was a very, very fat episode of a lot of things to discuss. But yeah, we'll still be bringing content throughout the off season. We're really excited about this podcast and to keep growing it. And it'll be a fun and interesting off season. And hopefully we'll get some great guests on to make it a little more entertaining. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. Thank you all for listening. You can catch me on Twitter, at Nate_Sanch77. Chris, what's your Twitter handle?
CDG928.
And then follow the podcast Twitter account at Brawl Mizzou. Again, it's at Brawl Mizzou. So thank you for listening. Be sure to tune in next week. We're coming at you with weekly episodes, record Wednesday, have them up Thursday morning, and we will see you guys next week.
Go Tigers.